Okay, so I did not feel like recording anything else because the last bit I tried to record, all the stuff I wrote, it was 7 hours and 51 minutes, and I realized I needed to sort through that. But with everything that's going on, in spite of honestly some psychological, some depression, some stuff making everything really hard right now, I can't not put this message out because again, nobody is talking about it. I keep waiting and keep waiting and keep one thing keeps happening after another and nobody says anything. So I'm just gonna get going. So this section, I've got literally, I'm gonna have to do these in portions. I might have thousands of hours of videos by the end of this. This one is primarily just gonna focus on breaking down Dave Chappelle's The Closer to help narrate and expose to anyone that because of their ingrained belief systems, because of their lack of exposure to things, because of how easily we are influenced by society, because of their preconceived notions about who Dave Chappelle was 20 years ago and how they've kind of accumulated credits for him and think that's a thing. I just want to sort of really break it down and help you see what I see and felt, what I think a lot of other people saw and felt, what some people felt but didn't have the words for. Um, because I see the harm trickling out. Like I have this theory that those of us with severe mental illness are like the canaries in the cave. You know, for minors, we'll croak before everybody says "get out," like, or the boiling frog in water. So that you have to when you boil frogs, I guess you do it real slowly so they don't notice, and by the time they do notice, their muscles are atrophied from the heat and they can't get out. I think we notice a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I think oh God, seeing Dave Chappelle's special and then seeing how many people didn't respond to it the way they should have, people who I thought were evolved, people who I look to, I've learned my lesson now. Comedians are not great philosophers because my whole life looked at all these comedians. I've memorized stand-ups. I've been obsessed with these people. I look to them for everything. I think a lot of us in the minority groups do because they're usually the only ones talking about us and only the ones giving perspectives that the rest of the world hasn't shoved down our throats every day. So usually that's where we find our allies and our heroes. I guess comedians are unwilling to pull their punches for anything. They can't be caged in unless it's for another comedian because good luck finding anyone other than Marc Maron that's took a swing at Dave Chappelle for the crimes he committed Dave Chappelle committed against, from my perspective, humanity. um, so, also, if you haven't already, I plan on titling this video Dave Chappelle, a win for white supremacy, because I hope it gets people's attention because the person who helped transform our views on racism, helped people see things they hadn't seen before, that to think that this man who was called the greatest of all time because we thought he was going to evolve and we would all evolve with him, is I'm not saying that guy's not in there somewhere. He's just, I don't know when he was that guy last, and sometimes people don't evolve. Sometimes they cement and stay where they are, and our love for them blinds us to the hurt that they are causing. So I loved Dave Chappelle. I still have love for him, to be honest, and could be me projecting. I think he may suffer from some mental illness. I think he's probably got some addiction issues. He's pretty honest about that stuff. So I'm also very worried for him because if nobody around him, I mean, they're all saying this isn't him. Well, not all. There's Patton Oswalt, I guess, saying this isn't the man I know. I think he's a good person. Well, you're not helping him by enabling him. You're not helping him by not letting him see how sick he is. So, I just want to put that out there because I try to be as compassionate as I can, and I'm gonna get pretty mad at him throughout this. So I might say some things that are emotionally driven. And to start this off too, because I know cancel culture is a big thing. Like already, people are probably like, "Here we go, cancel culture at it again." Well, I know better as somebody who has hallucinations regularly, has lived with them for years and years, to know that it's a waste of time to argue with someone about whether or not something they believe exists is actually there. But what helps me and what helps other people when I am hallucinating is if we create some rules so that if it does exist, it should meet these rules and we can both see it together. So I think for me, for cancel culture, since when I look at it in the world right now, it seems to be showing up most or mentioned most when it has to do with, specifically when it has to do with celebrities mocking marginalized communities, like Joe Rogan calling black people apes and using the N-word as much as he wants, like Dave Chappelle being, promoting Asian hate, misogyny, violence against women, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, all that stuff that Dave Chappelle now is participating in the promotion of. Just kind of defending it because you think like, I don't know. To be honest, so let's, because I don't, what people call cancel culture, I don't see. But here's the deal. I'm willing to believe, because it could be there. There are things, sometimes I see things that aren't there, and sometimes I miss things that are right in front of me. But for me, I think rules we could all probably agree on when it comes to cancel culture is if we're pointing at someone and saying they're canceled for attacking another community, I think we should probably take the average experience of a lot of the people from that community and compare it against how their life is now. So if it's a male comedian who's in trouble in hot water for misogynistic jokes, and we say that he's canceled, I mean, if he no longer has rights over what he does with his body, if he starts experiencing extreme sexual harassment, now, likely experiences rape and assault, gets less pay, finds himself underrepresented, finds medical professionals don't have all the information they need on him, finds even seatbelts aren't built to protect him suddenly, then I would say he's probably on his way to being canceled because he's almost been a woman. But there's a lot more to that. Like, you're like, okay, so, but even then, you're just equal to the people you're making fun of. So you'd have to be experiencing the worst of them, and then we'll say you're canceled. So if a racist, so Joe Rogan, so whatever people said, Joe Rogan's being canceled. He's being canceled, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so he's said, black people are apes, use the N-word. Clearly that's racism. So if he's canceled now, that must mean that, honestly, for him at this point, if he were canceled, then he would walk out his door, try to get in his house, and the cops would shoot him because they think he was trying to break in. That would be truly canceled for Joe Rogan, and it's a fair comparison to black people having to live the black experience every day, and him having a little bit of pushback from an audience. I don't even know, did he have to pay a fine? I'm not sure what happened. And I think you're getting that. So then, I think with Dave Chappelle, I don't know which community you want to choose that he made fun of. Maybe if he starts being assaulted, like the Asian community, because people blame him for spreading diseases, or his anti-Semitic take, or for the gay experience or the transgender experience, where he's afraid to go into certain bathrooms. He's more suicidal than usual. He can't get employment. He's experiencing discrimination everywhere he goes. He has comedians mocking him and the country supporting him, and all of the comedians' celebrity friends either staying silent or saying that he freed the slaves. If Dave Chappelle experienced all of that in extreme poverty, like I think a lot of black transgender people, I'll find out later, percentage of them are usually making about 10 grand a year. If Dave Chappelle reaches that level, which is equal to the marginalized groups that I guess we can start to talk about him being canceled, but that's just made equal from my perspective. But I think you see where we're going. So if you're going to tell me somebody's canceled because they mocked a certain community, I need evidence, because if I have to provide evidence that my hallucinations aren't real, it's only fair I ask the same thing of the rest of the world. And honestly, it's really annoying. Like Ricky Gervais and all of these comedians now that are like, can't wait to be canceled. Like, well, if you're mocking a certain community and you end up 6 feet underground, then I'll have said you did it. God. And what's so annoying too is Ricky Gervais. I love how he's like, oh, I'm so sick of these people crying over jokes. You know what I'm sick of? and again, everyone's being gaslighted by these comedians. There's no better time in history to be a comedian. With all the streaming platforms, with YouTube. I mean, think about it. Louis C.K. got a Grammy. Nobody's putting him on a network. Nobody's doing anything. He still got a Grammy. Do you think that happened back when Lenny Bruce and all those people were getting arrested just for saying lewd stuff? I mean, there are these comedians prior to today were making next to nothing. We're risking getting arrested regularly. We're getting arrested regularly. Lenny Bruce was in like a workhouse for 4 months once, I think, for saying some foul language. And now these comics today are talking about how dangerous it is. This is such a dangerous time to be a comic. I mean, it's so annoying. If I hear Joy Behar or Sarah Haynes, because I watch A View regularly, if I hear them say one more time how dangerous it is, it's more dangerous to be a flight attendant right now. And flight attendants are getting paid next to nothing, very rarely get applause, and almost nobody laughs at their jokes. So I am going to have way more pity for a flight attendant than I'm going to have for Dave Chappelle or any of your millionaire friends or your sad asses on The View. I mean, it's annoying. Oh, and such hypocrites, too. I mean, because these people, these comedians are talking about, these women on The View, they love, every day, they love to talk about how there are these politicians and all these people who are misogynistic, spreading anti-Semitism, spreading homophobic hate, spreading transphobic hate. When the trans Netflix walkout happened, when Dave Chappelle did all that stuff, not a thing. Good luck finding an episode of any of these comics. Samantha Bee, The View, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know if I just missed all the episodes where they talked about it, but I can't find them online either. Don't you think that's kind of odd that an entire community of comics, educated people who spend most of their year and time pointing at people who are doing the kinds of things that Dave Chappelle did, have nothing to say in defense of these trans community walkout, in defense of, and these are the people in the comic community. They're the ones that should have a voice, that should have, this is our rules or these are not our rules. And these people stayed silent, which obviously silence in face of you join the side of the oppressor. I forget the quote, but if your neutrality is not, you're not on our side. So we heard you, even though you didn't say anything. We heard it, and I've got something to say about every last one of you because you were all of my heroes. So the fact that Ellen, Whoopi, I mean, oh my God, these people who I just cannot believe are staying quiet. It's wrong. And it's annoying because they're also the same people who are like, I can't believe these Republicans know what a horror. Trump bragged about assaulting a woman. So does Dave Chappelle. Trump removed transgender rights. Dave would love to do that too. Trump, and how can these Republicans, how can they do it? How when they know better? Good question. How? When you know better, how? How are you doing it? How when you know all the statistics, when you have all the information on what it is, on what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to, what homosexual, transsexual, bisexual, what anybody who's different, Asian people, anybody, Jewish people, you had an Orthodox Jew on there who talked about her experience, and yet you had nothing, absolutely nothing to contribute when it comes to Dave Chappelle. Oh, and I love too how after you talked about the misogyny of Roe versus Wade, you cut to a little clip where you're like, poor Dave got tackled. We hope he's well, but totally failed to mention the fact that he accused it of being a trans man. Never talked about the fact that he tried to get felony charges for somebody whose arm was broken, whose face was beaten up, who he found out has mental illness, who was likely in a state of psychosis, who was triggered because he was talking about Dave Chappelle was talking about anti-gay material and homelessness, which this person was bisexual and experienced homelessness before, found very triggering. And because the mental health just in our country is shit, he got into a state where he probably should have never been to that show because he had nowhere to go for treatment. So I got a lot to say about all of this stuff. And I just can't. It's going to be a lot of this, a lot of me getting worked up because I probably am in no state to be talking about things that trigger me, but nobody else is. So somebody has got to do it. I just can't. I can't listen to one more comic talk about how hard it is. It's never been better for you. It's never. Look at how many rich fucking comics were in their 1950s. How many? How many is there are today? How many comics are getting arrested today for saying lewd things? How many? How many were there back then? So don't bullshit your audience. There's Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. They're getting educated through entertainment. They're going to figure it out eventually. All right. Yeah. So I let's see here. I put down some stuff to help me get through this. Oh yeah, I don't know. There was a show called, it was like Talk Funny. It was on HBO. There's an episode with Louis C.K., Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, and Ricky Gervais where they kind of talk about this stuff. I remember this episode. I noticed this because in it specifically, so Ricky Gervais is saying like, no, because Louis C.K. is like saying, and you can make any joke. There's no, and and Ricky Gervais says, no, there's a limit. You could, because if you start making racist jokes, and you're not aware of what you're doing, then that's actual racism. And then Jerry and Louis say, no, that's not true. And then Chris Rock says, I thought as comedians we all agreed that we make fun of what people do, not who or what people are. He talked about how he thought it was really gross and ugly when comedians were making fun of Ricky Martin's homosexuality, and that's not. And I was like, yes, Chris, yeah, I'm on board with that. Oh, God. And then Louis C.K. makes this rape joke. This was before all this stuff came out. And the joke is literally, I'm totally against rape unless you want to have sex with somebody and they don't want to. And then what are you going to do? You have to rape them. That's the joke. Jerry Seinfeld thought it was hysterical. He's like, you jumped lasers. It's so good. And I just remember thinking, God, that's disturbing. Disturbing. Something is wrong. Something is wrong with Louis C.K., and sure enough, so I can't help but think maybe there is something in these comics jokes. We have evidence that it was meant. There's a little something there with Louis C.K. Should we have seen the signs then? Probably. Should we maybe take a look now at some of the comics and stuff they're saying and think, are we saying this is okay by supporting these people? Are we enabling them to become the more horrible versions of themselves? And is that helping them or harming them? And are we helping or harming the world? Okay, so let me, also, because this really bothers me, because I don't know if you watched my other video, but I love Maya Angelou. When I talk to God, I'm talking to Maya, I pray to Maya, read her stuff all the time, listen to her, just to find my center, and I'm pretty bitter, because both Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle met Maya Angelou. Like, they had this great honor that I will never have. And they have this responsibility, I feel like, as these purveyors of what should be truth, and that I think Maya probably recognized that in them, and you'd think they would have taken that responsibility more seriously, because I can tell you, she would not be okay with what Dave Chappelle has done and saying. So, and I know that's a big statement, but it wouldn't be very hard to find quotes and historical context to back what I'm saying. So if you think Maya Angelou would have Dave Chappelle's back on this one, you load up your evidence, I'll load up mine, and we'll have a discussion. Maybe we'll record it so I can share it with everybody. All right, so actually, so Marc Maron, I want to give credit, because he is literally, because I'm in heartbroken, devastated. I've given up on, I don't believe in comedians or comedy anymore right now. I'm in a really dark space about it, because they kept me alive for so long, and what happened with Dave Chappelle, and then, losing him was enough, but then he took out my whole world afterwards, because none of them, not a one, stood up against him. Pretty incredible. I don't know if history is like, I don't know, because even SCTV made fun of George Carlin. George Carlin's like revered. So apparently Dave Chappelle's like literally he is the Trump of the comic world. But I will say, of the things that Marc Maron said, he said a couple different things, but this was the most powerful. He said, there are people whose truths, if they want to live them, have to take tremendous risks. Some of them are attacked just walking out of their houses. There's a big difference between the courage to live your truth and the courage to speak your truth. Nobody is taking away the freedom to speak your truth. But a lot of times, the people that are speaking that truth, that controversial truth, are diminishing the ability for people to live their truth. I'm going to go on for a long time here with breaking down each of his jokes, but I think Marc Maron and his genius right there, nothing I continue to say really matters, because right there he just blew it all out. He's like, yeah, you can do that, and you can pretend you're courageous, you can pretend you're a hero, but you're not. You're just not. All right, so I'm going to go joke by joke. And then another thing I thought I would do to kind of help kind of make clear for certain people in case you have any inherent bias. I think there's certain, most of us, well, I hope that's not true actually. What I am going to do to make a point is that Dave Chappelle, throughout his closer, pretty much illustrates that women, white people, gay people, all are like an elite class of people that until pretty much until he doesn't have to care about their rights until he is until he is in full white supremacy until he is as supreme as a white straight cis man that owns property. I think that's kind of what he's saying. So, and that the black community's got the worst of it. Yeah, literally, it's horrifying. It is disturbing. It is upsetting. But you are propping up the tenets of white supremacy when you're promoting Asian hate, when you are promoting homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia. Misogyny is the root of all evil. Literally, the first thing white men did to create power, because there were probably just other women around. Literally, look at Adam and Eve. Like she got smarter than us first. We got to make her less than immediately. And then there's probably, they're like, oh, well, these women are getting real problematic. Oh, great. People who look different. We'll make them more powerful than them. And then we'll tell them, each of them, who to pick on, who to point at, so that none of them unify against us and create true equality and realize the power that they have as a community, and realize that actually, and if we erase them from history, they'll have no idea that they've always been supporting each other throughout history, and that will slow them down. We'll just keep erasing them from history and keep telling the new generations that they hate each other. So, Dave, you can be black and you can promote white supremacy. And that is what your stand-up did. And that is what everybody that was silent about it and participated in the support of it did. And I know how risky a statement that is. And I'm literally going to do, I got an 8-hour video if you want it, but this is going to be however short I can make this, because I'm just going to hit the bullet points, because this needs to be said and put out there immediately. Especially with Netflix now, like literally 1 month after they create a policy where they're like, if you don't like our material, you can just leave. Instead of people just leaving, they just said, oh, we're going to get rid of the LGBT people, the social justice warriors for black rights, Latino rights, trans rights. Just a coincidence, folks. And it's scary. We are in a scary time. So now Netflix is like Truth Social streaming service, apparently, is where the direction they're headed. Okay, so Dave Chappelle, his first joke in the set, or at least what I wrote down again, this is going to be a quick bullet point, or not that quick, I don't know, I'm already 22 minutes in. He talks about his immune system. So he had COVID. He talks about seeing on the news, his beloved black people beat up his beloved Asian brothers and sisters, and then he immediately turns it and says, and then I started laughing. He started laughing, thinking about imagining that's what's happening in his body. So I had hoped that he would he would twist that into something like, seeing the black and Asian violence really frustrated me, because I know historically, you expect him to be educated, that actually there's no particular black criminality against Asians, that during all this COVID stuff, there's no more black people beating up on Asians than there were white people beating up on Asians. It was just the news portraying black criminality so that Asians could see that and think black people are criminals and want to attack us, so that black people could see that and either feel validated in their dislike of Asian people, or I don't know what. Or they'd make jokes about it and perpetuate it. Dave Chappelle sees it and he makes a joke about it. Now the world thinks it's hysterical to imagine black people beating up Asian people. That's so screwed up. I was very, very disturbed. And again, it's also just bad jokes, bad humor. I'm not a professional comedian. Let's see. Black and Asian stuff. Think about it. He could be like, look, there's 1 billion of them and we're in a minority. And think about it. When black and Asians come together, they make magic happen. Tiger Woods, he's the king of a once all-white sport. Kamala Harris, she is the first female vice president of the United States. And he goes, why do you think he married an Asian? He could be like, why do you think my kids are half Asian? He goes, I'm thinking about their future. There's a million like jokes he could have done that are still like on the fence, but that are like, no, we need to bring together. We need to love each other. We're more powerful together. And he should know the history and educate his audience. I mean, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that banned Chinese immigrants from becoming U.S. citizens. There's in 1942 the Japanese Americans in internment camps. I mean, George Takei, there are people alive today that remember being in those internment camps. Like, you understand, after they came out of those internment camps, they went back they had to be in communities that were disadvantaged, which usually is where you would find the black people in disadvantaged communities. And then so they built resentment over having, storefronts there. They also, again, wiped from history. Black and Asians have worked together many, many, many times over the years to create freedom. I remember after there was like $500 million in LA because there had been a lot of miseducation, misinformation about the Asian community in there. So after the riots in LA, there's like $500 million in damage to Korean businesses specifically. So then they started a whole education system. They started educating the community. And now 9 out of 10 Koreans are, support the Black rights movement, and the black people show up for the anti-Asian or the Asian anti-Asian hate events. So it's about engendering community. And this is no time to joke about Asian hate. I mean, from March 19th to December 31st of 2020, there were 2,808 firsthand accounts of Asian hate. That's 150% increase from 2019. There's women. I mean, there was a 61-year-old Filipino man that was slashed in the face as he rode the subway in New York. 64-year-old Vietnamese woman who was robbed in a parking lot in San Jose. An 84-year-old Thai man was shoved to the ground in San Francisco, which resulted in his death. An 89-year-old Chinese woman was set on fire while walking the street. I mean, this is disturbing. And there's just no. It doesn't serve us. It's not. I have too many Asian people I love, too many Asian American people that are forever foreigners. They always have to defend. Their parents were American. I mean, have been here for a while, and it's exhausting. I mean, I can't even imagine for them to just feel constantly embattled and not see themselves represented almost anywhere. My Asian acting friends, it feels like now we're making progress, but up until recently, and even recently, there's not a whole lot, but up until recently, they just had to pray that Miss Saigon would do another tour and another tour and another tour and another tour. So I don't think that Dave Chappelle should be knocking on the Asian community. I don't think that is for sure punching down right out of the gate, promoting Asian hate at a dangerous time. Not a fan. Second joke I found offensive, where he talks about how this story where the Jews want to claim Earth for their very own, because he calls it space Jews. It's these these aliens who want to claim Earth for they try somewhere else out, and it was terrible. They didn't like it, so they came back and they said, now Earth is all ours. And he says it's called space Jews. Yeah, that's super anti-Semitic. Oh, and I forgot to do references to both of these jokes. So let's say if Ellen did that first joke about the black people beating up Asian people inside her blood, but now we just switch it, and she says, I saw these white people beating up on black people on TV, my beloved white people, my beloved black brothers and sisters, and then I thought that was happening in my body, and I started laughing. Would that joke go over as well? Would we find it as funny if Ellen said that she thought it was hysterical that her white blood cells were beating up black people in her imagination? I don't think so. And I also don't think that if Ellen said that there was a community of people that tried a different planet and it didn't go well, and they came back here and they decided to take us over, and they're called space blacks, I think there might be a little bit of a pushback. So why do we not have an issue with the Asian violence, and why do we not have an issue with the anti-Semitism? But I think a lot of people, if they saw that, would be like, ugh. Right, because it's a problem, because the water's starting to boil, and we're all so used to the heat that we're just accepting horrible shit coming out of people's mouths. People who are supposed to be profound comedic philosophers who I thought were going to evolve and transform over time, but nope. Yeah, and if you weren't sure about how the Jewish community has supported the black community, and why Dave Chappelle is supporting white supremacy and working against his own community, um, so let's see. Well, also, just so you know, right now, anti Semitism is on the rise as well. 1 in 4 Jewish people report being the target of anti Semitism. Out of fear of anti Semitism, 39% of American Jews changed their behavior in 2021. 2021 was the worst year for anti Semitism in a decade. Within the U.S., New York recorded a 100% increase in the number of anti Semitic incidents in 2021. 503 compared to the previous year's 252. In Los Angeles, there was a 59.2% increase. I mean, we saw people wearing Nazi propaganda into the Capitol, I think right there. And just so you know, again, the American Jews played a significant role in the founding and funding of some of the most important civil rights organizations, including the NAACP, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. In 1909, Henry Moskowitz joined E.B. Du Bois, and other civil rights leaders to found the NAACP. They served as the national president. One of them served as national president for over a decade. They found a leadership conference from 1910 to 1940. More than 2,000 primary and secondary schools and 20 black colleges, including Howard, Dillard, and Fisk universities, were established in whole or in part by contributions from Jewish philanthropist Julius Rosenwald. At the height of the so-called Rosenwald schools, nearly 40% of black people in the South were educated at one of these institutions. During the civil rights movement, Jewish activists represented a disproportionate number of white people involved in the struggle. Jews made up half of the young people who participated in the Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964. Leaders of the Reform movement were arrested with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in St. Augustine, Florida in 1964 after a challenge to the racial segregation of public accommodations. There's a picture of Dr. King with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965 were drafted in the conference room of Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism under the aegis of the Leadership Conference, which for decades was located in the RAC's building. The Jewish community has continued its support of civil rights, addressing persistent discrimination, voting, housing, and employment against not only women and people of color, but also in the LGBTQ plus community and the disabled community. So, yeah, Dave, you're working against pretty much all of us. If you are promoting anti-Semitism in any way, those people have been here for every single group. Women, LGBT, you're black. It doesn't matter. They are here for humanity. I'm going to keep going. Oh, third joke. He talks about a children's book, which I'm not even going to put that in here because it literally, just listen to it because he could apply it to transgender people. It talks about a black man making a reservation. He sounds like a white man, but he shows up and he's a giant black man. So they say he can't go there and the police shoot him and it just breaks his heart. The whole children's book, you could switch to a transgender one, but of course Dave Chappelle can't see that. And then his next bit, he heads into... he says, could you agree that gays can be racist? Yes. like he thinks that's a new idea. Oh, and then he says he's here for the release of DaBaby, because it's unfair that DaBaby gets in more trouble for hurting gay people's feelings than for killing a man at Walmart. So first, I don't understand so as long as if gay people are racist, then he's allowed to be homophobic and transphobic? I don't get it. So does that mean that as long as the white LGBT community can locate and point to black people that are homophobic and transphobic, we don't have to treat black people with respect? We can just say the N-word and say all that racist stuff we want because fair's fair, right? What? This is a grown man, a grown, brilliant man. Something is wrong and nobody around him, nobody anywhere is really, really addressing it. Because they just rather protect him or think they're protecting him when they're not. And then, let's see. All right. Okay, so then the next joke says... Oh yeah, he says he doesn't hate gay people. He's being misunderstood. He's just jealous of them because they're doing so much better than the Black civil rights movement, um, and that he thinks, he wishes that maybe if Martin Luther King had suggested booty shorts and oil, then the black people would be doing a lot better. Well, that's ignorant as hell because you just erased one of the most important, powerful, pivotal people of the Black Civil Rights Movement from history because he was gay. Have you heard of Bayard Rustin? MLK Jr. would not be MLK Jr. if it wasn't for Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin, when MLK Jr. and them met, Martin Luther King was not a peaceful path. That was not his movement. His house was filled with guns. Bayard was like, get these out of here. This is not how we roll. Bayard's the one that organized the marches. Bayard's the one that involved. But because he was gay, eventually got pushed out of certain things. But do some research. There was no booty shorts and oil, but all of that movement, all of the civil rights stuff that you're looking back to, guess who organized that? A gay man. So gay people did get you your rights, you ignorant asshole. And guess what? More of the black community identify as LGBTQ plus than do the white community. That means when you are being homophobic and transphobic and saying these things, you are doing more damage to a larger percentage of your community than the community you're claiming very later on to actually clarifying that this is supposed to be against. So this is extremely damaging to every community, especially the black community. Okay. Oh, and not only that, 2 of the 3 leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, gay, queer. Hello. So lots of leaders. Just do some research. There's tons of gay. You know what? There's actually gay black comedians now. Believe it or not, only one that I know of, Gerard Carmichael. That's famous. But yeah, he only just came out recently because it's so easy to come out. I mean, he just couldn't, it was the easiest thing in the world, tons of acceptance. Ask Gerard about it. That's why he waited, because he was just like, it doesn't matter because it's so easy. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. Oh my God. All right, 6th joke. Dave says that he prefers the Stonewall gaze. Dave, you must have watched that stupid Stonewall movie where they cast nothing but white, hetero, cis, straight, bad actors. I'm sorry. Because that should have been trans women of color predominantly, and white trans women, then some gays, then some... Yeah, but predominantly the people that you are about to hate upon and that you love to hate upon, that you're obsessed with, and I can't help but think Psych 101, when I was a homophobic homosexual and it was all I could talk about and all I could think about and all I could speak about hatefully, that said something about what's going on inside of me. So I'm just guessing, just a shot in the dark here, that little obsession you're having. That's why I'm trying to be compassionate about this, because I'm wondering if you're struggling. But those are the people that you're saying you love, or the people that are speaking out against you that you couldn't give a fuck about from your behavior. Also, as much as you miss the Stonewall gays, I miss the comedians that time. Those were not whiny, bitchy, wah comedians. They get locked up in jail. They go out and do a show the next day. They get 4 months in a workhouse. They go to show the next day. They get refused to go to Britain to do a show because they're found. They don't care. They'll just go to find another place to do a show that night. Dave Chappelle gets $24 million or $20+ million from Netflix. Gets sold out shows, gets standing ovations at the Hollywood Bowl from all the celebrities, gets to still say all this homophobic, transphobic stuff, gets to refuse to apologize, gets to pretend to apologize and take it back at award ceremonies where he's giving something to Jay-Z and has a picture of the president. He gets to do all of that shit and bitch the whole time. Literally gets another 4 deals. He gets another 4 specials with Netflix. Only months after that supposed controversy. Can we count it as a controversy? Because it was fucking a blip for most of the rest of the world, except for the rest of us who sees what it means and feels what it meant. And Dave Chappelle still gets to bitch. And then he doesn't feel... he thinks everybody else should suffer worse consequences than him for everything. I'm going to get to that later about the guy that attacked him. And oh my God. Oh, okay. See, this is why I didn't want to do this. All right. So the next joke, he talks about, there's a tall 6'5" Texas corn-fed gay man, and he calls him a bitch ass or something that could be perceived as a gay slur. So it starts a confrontation. Dave Chappelle says, we were about to fight. And then what does he do? He calls the cops. And he goes, a black gay would never do that. And he makes this man seem racist because he doesn't want to get assaulted. I mean, it would be one thing if Dave didn't just say, I was about to fight, and then doesn't, a little bit after this, talk to us about and brag about assaulting a woman and getting in a fight. So we know he has a history of violence. We know he has a tendency to violence. And he just admitted beforehand that he was about to enact violence. And yet the guy who made the phone call, who's probably had trauma, who's probably been assaulted, who probably didn't have other friends like Dave Chappelle probably did, like security guards around him. Do you think Dave Chappelle was really there by himself? I don't know. Could have been. But he seems pretty paranoid. He's always got security guards always talking about how trans people are trying to kill him. So hard-pressed for me to imagine he went anywhere where there was a 6'5" Texas corn-fed man with the shirt tied in a bow, that he didn't bring security if he really is that scared. So anyway, I think it's really annoying. I totally get where he's coming from. White people should not abuse their power and call because it is dangerous. But also, it's hypocritical because in a lie that black men wouldn't do that. DaBaby called DaBaby, the one he's defending, called the cops on domestic abuse, I believe, for his Dominican girlfriend. Dave Chappelle actually found it wasn't enough. That a person of color with a disability who has experienced homelessness, who's a single father, who's Dave's security team assaulted so severely, has broken arms and is abused all over, has 4 misdemeanors. He has the whole world who remembers this humiliation. It's recorded for history. Dave does not think that's enough. Dave pressed for further charges. So Dave does not care about minorities and the police because guess what? Statistics on that shit, on mentally ill people, let's see. People with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed during a police encounter than other civilians approached or stopped by law enforcement. Numbering fewer than 1 in 50 U.S. adults, individuals with untreated severe mental illness are involved in at least 1 in 4 and as many as half of all fatal police shootings. Because of this prevalence, reducing encounters between on-duty law enforcement and individuals with the most severe psychiatric diseases may represent the single most immediate practical strategy for reducing fatal police shootings in the United States. By dismantling the mental health treatment system, which we did all over the country a long time ago. Look into that. Not that long ago, but a while back. We have turned mental health crisis from a medical issue into a police matter. This is patently unfair, illogical, and is proving harmful both to the individual in desperate need of care and the officers who are forced to respond. An estimated 56% of state prisoners, 45% of federal prisoners, and 64% of jail inmates have a mental health problem. We need to restore mental health systems so that individuals with severe mental illness are not left to deteriorate until their actions provoke a police response. And then when that police response happens, that Dave Chappelle isn't happy until that person is more miserable than they already fucking were. Because God forbid Dave Chappelle live with his $100 million, $20 million per episode, knowing that there's somebody out there who could be suffering worse than they already were. You could fund reliable federal tracking and reporting of all incidents involving the use of deadly force by law enforcement. Assure that the role of mental illness in fatal police shootings is identified and reported. It should be, these statistics should be really terrifying, and I'm really, really disturbed by Dave Chappelle and by the fact that nobody is even talking about that. Nobody's like drawing the correlation where Dave doesn't believe that the trans community should see a response and consequences for him so that we can feel more safe, so that a precedent is set for every other community that he pushes against. But he gets that idea because he's like, well, this will set a precedent. How are comedians supposed to feel safe if somebody can get away with harming people and suffer and this guy suffered way more consequences? I don't get it. He has severe consequences, but Dave doesn't see them because all Dave can see is himself. Oh yeah. And the next bit, which just the most disturbing, they're all disturbing. I say this about everyone because every one of them bothers me to the core. He brags about assaulting a woman, but don't worry, he clarifies that he did so. It's okay because she was barely identifiable to him as one because of her masculine presentation. So pretty much She accosted him. He talked to her like he admittedly says, talked to her like a pimp and said, I'm about to slap the shit out of you, whispered to her like a pimp. And then he brags about beating her up, tenderizing her breasts like chicken cutlets. Now, again, I keep forgetting to do this, but if Ellen had done any of, think about this, if Ellen had bragged about assaulting a black woman, if Ellen had insulted the Black Rights Movement, if Ellen had done any of this, would we be talking about whether or not Ellen should be booking other specials? Would we be arguing with whether or not the black employees at Netflix felt like they had created an unsafe, racist environment? I mean, it just feels pretty obvious to me, but for some reason the world's not seeing it. Okay. So I think the fact that the assaulting of a woman got overlooked in and of itself is wildly indicative of where we are as a culture, that people laughed at that we talked about Dave Chappelle's special a lot, but this got brushed over. Like, I mean, so did the Asian hate, so did the anti-Semitism. They're like half mentions. Oh, there's some Asian hate, some anti-Semitism, some misogyny. All right, so if you don't know, as a country, we are the only Western nation in the top 10 like most dangerous countries to live as a woman. I think some categories we're in the top 3. We're like number 3 and number 5. So that means that the risks women face in terms of sexual violence, including rape, sexual harassment, coercion into sex, and a lack of access to justice in rape cases. Physical and sexual violence, sex trafficking, lack of access to health care, death at childbirth, especially for black women, gun violence. I mean, this is crazy. 1 in 3 American women are sexually assaulted during their lifetime. 1 in 5 American women are raped during their lifetime. 10 million American women live in violent households right now. In the 21st century alone, more American women have been killed by their male partners than people have died in war. That is including 9/11. That's just women killed by the men they love. This is not women killed by men or women. This is just women killed by men they love. In the 21st century, in this century, more women have died in the United States, have been killed by their male partners than have died in all of the wars combined, including 9/11. Nearly 1,800 women were murdered by men in 2019, and the most common weapon used was a gun. 47,000 women worldwide in 2020 were killed by intimate partners. A girl was killed by a family member every 11 minutes. If you are disconnected from that, that shows you how disassociated we have had to become as a culture. As I know lots of women that are disassociated that watched that special and probably glossed over that because their trauma is so severe and so built in, and they're being told so much by so many environments that that's not important. They need to shove that down and they need to get over it. And that's not what a strong woman is. And you don't talk about those things, or I don't know all the things that they tell themselves because I don't live in their shoes, but I love them and I care for them and they matter to me and they've been here for me. And I refuse. This is particularly upsetting because this special came out. I watched it. So I think it came out in October. In June of last year, someone I love. Whoa, sorry. Someone I love, a friend who is a black lesbian who does not, she wears, I don't think I've ever seen her wear a dress or skirt. She presents, is comfortable. I'm not going to say male because I don't believe in presenting as one of she presents as her. And she is not been given not a single break in life. And she has busted her ass, and she has taken care of loved ones. She adopted or helped raise children when she was a child. It feels like she is kind, and she is loving, and she is brilliant, and she never complains. And she asked some guys to leave a party, and they waited till she left, and they assaulted her violently. Oh, it just made me feel so powerless and so angry. And she just recovered. And she's still recovering. And I'm mad. And if it had been worse, if she hadn't lived, like, I don't know who would have fought. I would have fought, but a black lesbian feels like the world doesn't pay much attention. So him telling that joke, I did not find it funny. Oh, man. The next joke, he insults the appearance of a woman using her whiteness as a descriptor for her ugliness, and then jokes about threatening her, shutting up and killing her and putting her body in the trunk. I think that's all very obvious. And again, if Ellen made jokes where she talked about, like, you know, where he points out the masculine characteristics of a woman to diminish her, it would be like Ellen saying, look at that, you know, that afro hair and those Missy Elliott lips, and, you know, whatever racist term you could put on all that stuff. Okay. Let's see. Sorry, I did not like telling that story. The next joke is he talks about how he looked up the definition of feminist and that he is one, because it says a human who believes women should have equal rights or something to that effect. And then, of course, he immediately makes a joke that he was shocked to find out that it didn't mean frumpy dyke. Yeah, so, I mean, I just feel like, why do I have to explain to people? You get why him saying that he thought feminists meant frumpy dyke was wrong, right? And then he continues to say, you know, the kind of frumpy dyke that cries rape. When you look at her and she's so ugly, you're like, don't believe you. Yeah, that's what Dave Chappelle did. He literally says, and especially talks about two classes of women. There's either the frumpy dyke, who he's made clear it's okay to assault, and that if she claims rape, obviously she's lying, because nobody would rape that bitch. And then everybody else, like, if they're pretty enough, then they're rapeable. Like, I mean, that's inherently, what's so gross is this happens a lot. Like, lots of men, in one way or another, classify women that way. They're either rapeable or not. Gross. Oh, okay. Oh yeah. Not only are women if you're a frumpy dyke, are you assaultable? You're assaultable, and he feels confident and comfortable joking about it because nobody gives a flying fuck about you. He knows he can re-traumatize you. God bless that woman. Help her. God help her. Not bless. Bless and help her, because now the whole world's laughed at her trauma. All right. His next joke, he says he mocks the Me Too movement as being a whites-only movement that black women are against. Tarana Burke, black woman, started that. Yeah, so that's not true at all. I mean, I just, again, working against his own movement, you know, this black woman who worked years and years, and her movement finally exploded, and one of her dreams coming true, and then Dave Chappelle diminishes it and says that, black women aren't for it. Oh yeah, and then he actually has the audacity to reference Anti-Woman by Sojourner Truth, because he as part of the Me Too movement, he's like, it's just like back when Sojourner Truth, the white women wanted women's rights, and they weren't going to let Sojourner Truth speak because even though she was a woman, she wasn't a black woman, so she wasn't as equal. Okay, so what you're doing, you mean? So that, because, even though black LGBT people are still black, they're not the same as you. Even though Asian people are still a minority, they're not your minority. Even though Jewish people are experiencing hate and prejudice and have worked to support civil rights movements, and they are discriminating against minority, they're not your level. And so it's very frustrating. And then if he had read Anti-Woman, it's about how if you suffer and if you struggle and if you have less than and you're just asking for a little bit, then what kind of asshole wouldn't give it to you? So let me read it, and just to give you an idea. So they're at it's like a written of them talking back and forth. So Sojourner says, that man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. Ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most of all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's this thing they call it? Intellect? What's that got to do with women's rights or blacks' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? That little man in that black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they is asking to do it. The men better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me, and now old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say. I mean, that's like the first mic drop in history. She is like, I feel weird about that because I don't want to do dramatic reading because I'm not Sojourner Truth, but I also feel like it's obvious. Like, what that woman said was brilliant. Yes, Dave, what you're talking about, you are doing. You are the white woman, and all of the minorities you're pitting us against each other are Sojourner Truth. We're saying, are we not human too? Are we not minorities too? Are we not suffering too? Are we not fighting as hard for ourselves and for you? Are we not worthy too? If we have less than you, if we're asking less for you and you won't give us some, doesn't that make you the asshole? And Dave can't see it, does it right in front of everybody. Literally calls himself out. Nobody catches it. Nobody points this out. All right. And then next, he mocks the feminist movement and says they need to get off the bus and have real talk, that it's all about real talk. His bus reference is because he left $50 million on the bus because he realized how he left $50 million and the reason why he left that $50 million is because he realized how dangerous hate humor was. And he said no amount of money would be worth putting that kind of hate out into the world. And now he's become this. Unbelievable. And then he's talking about how you have to have real talk with people. This coming from the guy who has yet to have a single honest to God, open, fair conversation with anybody, recorded like grown LGBT people, grown like at cameras, where everyone's at cameras, not just his crew. He doesn't, and actually to have the talk. He hasn't done it. So he's full of shit. Oh yeah. He then said to, he said that the women who addressed his misogyny in a previous special, that he canceled them. And by that, he means he will no longer honor them by masturbating to the thought of them. Oh, he defends his right to tell the women's right movement what they should do by saying he earned the right to tell every movement what to do, particularly the women's right movement, when he left that 50 million. He's real hung up on what he did 20. He can't, literally, he thinks he doesn't have to do anything good for the rest of his life because 20 years ago he made a brave choice. That's not how things work. I'm so sorry. So he insults the Me Too movement. Says that he wait, hold on, let me keep going. His idea. Oh yeah, that's right. His idea is that if all the women he had fired, or if all the women had fired all the men, so their agents, their talent managers, their PR people, fire all the men and go find a woman in a mail room and said, if you talk to her, then none of those women would have been assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, and the women's rights movement would have moved up. I mean, first off, that is the sickest form of victim shaming. He literally just blamed all of those women for literally the Hollywood society raping them, not just Harvey Weinstein, but everyone. I can't even imagine if if Ellen DeGeneres made a comment, she said, the reason why I get to tell the black community what to do, if the black community had decided to just fire all of their managers, fire all their white people, fire all the white, just don't work with any of the white people, then they wouldn't have this problem. It's black people's fault that they have this problem because they worked with white people. That would be the end of Ellen's career. That would be the end of it. Period. But when Dave Chappelle does that to women, in misogynistic USA, not a problem. We don't even bat an eye. Ugh. And he literally calls cancel culture, he says that someone losing their job is akin to killing them. But then he suggests cancel culture. He goes, cancel, fire everybody. The solution is cancel culture. And then later he says the problem is cancel culture. Again, nobody's pointing this out. All of these things. We're not even through the special yet. Dave's already like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Bad comedy, bad writing, lazy, horrible, hateful, misogynistic, just hateful shit. God. So the next joke, he says, what the feminist movement needs is a male leader, that they will be given he will give them all of the equality and freedom they deserve as long as they suck his dick. All right, let's do that Ellen reference again. Imagine if Ellen said, black people, I will give you all of the equality and freedom you deserve as long as you keep my plantation running. That, again, her career is over, right? Where's Roseanne? She called one senator an ape, and she lost it, and we haven't seen from her. Accurate. I believe that is the appropriate response, considering she's made no attempt to make amends or grow as a human being. Maybe if she had done lots of work, she had been brave, she had literally let cameras watch her do that work as she went to different black communities, black rights movements, started doing that stuff. So I'm not saying people can't go, we cancel it forever, but if they don't want to change, they're perpetuating hate, I'm not mad that I'm not seeing Roseanne. So why am I seeing Dave Chappelle? Why is he making more money? And now, I don't think it's coincidence. Netflix feels empowered to get rid of all sorts of minority supporters, and they're going to, now change their whole streaming. God only knows to what. And Roe versus Wade. The whole world just feels more comfortable with a lot of horrible things when we have these powerful people saying stuff and the other powerful people backing them. The people who usually would cause pushback, that would cause people to see this for what it is, but nobody's saying a damn thing. Okay, next. He says you don't know what a woman. Oh yeah, he says you don't know what a woman is nowadays, and that trans people want him dead, and that people warn him that trans people are after him. All right, it is extremely dangerous to paint trans people as criminals or conspiratorial murderers. He's doing the same thing to the trans community that the white community does to the black people, criminalizing them, making them so when people see them, they see a threat. They don't see a human. And he has no problem with that. He is literally as horrible as the people he's pushing against. And transgender people are far, far, far more likely to be the victims of violence than the ones enacting violence. LGBT people are nearly 4 times more likely than non-LGBT people to experience violent victimization, including rape, sexual assault, and aggravated or simple assault, are 6 times more likely to experience violence by someone who is well known to them, and 2.5 times more likely to undergo it at the hands of a stranger. LGBT women are 5 times more likely to experience violent victimization. LGBT men are twice as likely. Half of all victimizations are not reported to the police. Transgender people of color face higher rates of poverty, violence, and HIV infection. 41% of black transgender people have experienced homelessness. HUD has laws at single-sex shelters that prevent trans women from seeking shelter, so they have nowhere to go. And I know gay men that have been in abusive relationships that I've tried to help, and it's really, really hard to find. It's hard. I mean, it's difficult. Good luck finding. If you're a gay man in an abusive relationship, try to find a safe place to go where and you keep getting kicked out from one place to another. It's sad. The American Medical Association labeled the killing of trans women of color an epidemic. Black trans people don't feel safe reporting to police because of harassment. Black trans people in a survey found 38% reported harassment, 15% reported physical assault, and 7% reported sexual assault. Last year, 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide. 42%. 42. Black transgender people have an unemployment rate of 26%. 41% of transgender people have actually experienced homelessness. 34% of black transgender people make less than $10,000 a year. 49% of black transgender people report having attempted suicide. The Trump administration, on the 4-year anniversary of the massacre at the gay nightclub in Orlando, in the middle of Pride Month, finalized a regulation that erased the protections for transgender patients against discrimination by doctors, hospitals, and health insurance companies. This they announced on the 4-year anniversary of that massacre because that's how sick that administration was. Black transgender people have an unemployment rate of 26%. 41% of transgender people have actually experienced... Oh, I think I'm repeating the same thing. I'm so sorry. Okay. So here's the transgender youth statistics. 2% of high school students identify as transgender. Applied to all youth, that means 1.3 million trans youth exist between the ages of 0 and 17. That's a lot of kids' lives that are affected by this. Trans youth who develop in supportive environments have a 52% reduction in suicidal thoughts and a 46% decrease in suicide attempts. But only 27% of transgender people report from being from supportive families, and less than 43% report having even one person to turn to when they are depressed or scared. Only 9% of trans youth say their communities are accepting. Only 8% of trans youth say their place of worship is accepting. 80% of transgender students said they avoided bathrooms because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. 64% of transgender students avoided gym class because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. 59% of transgender students had been required to use a bathroom that did not match the gender they live every day. And only 12% of trans youth say their school or district has official policies supporting trans students. Transgender and non-conforming people face rampant discrimination in healthcare settings, are regularly denied needed care, and experience a range of health risks because they are gender or non-gender conforming, according to a report. More than 6,450 transgender and non-gender conforming people. Nearly 1 in 5 reported being refused care outright because they were trans or non-conforming. 28% reported high levels of postponing medical care because of disrespect they received when they tried to go in. Another 28% were subject to harassment. 50% of the sample reported having to teach their medical providers about transgender care. Despite barriers, let's see. The majority has, only a minority has had any surgery, despite the fact that a strong majority stated wanting to have it. Respondents reported having more than 4 times the national average of HIV infection. 41% reported attempting suicide. Compared to 41%, so 1% of the general, 1.6% of the general population will say they've attempted suicide. 41% of the transgender community reports having attempted suicide. Do you understand how significant that is? Clearly not. They talk about, I don't want to read all that stuff because it's pretty upsetting for me, but they talk about the real quotes from trans people going to hospitals and being mistreated after being raped, about not being treated human, just disgusting stuff. And 47% of black trans people are going to be incarcerated. Anti-trans policies geared toward trans kids. There are laws banning ban gender-affirming medical care for children, where you get prison sentences of up to 10 years for doctors that provide such care. So the thing is, all these medical bans for trans youth, it's transphobia. The greater levels of support and acceptance they receive dramatically lowers the likelihood they will engage in self-harm or suicide. So the first thing we need to do to save their life is give them access to that care. It's not to prevent them to get to it. Okay. Next joke that he did was the bathroom. He did a bathroom ban joke that no American should have to present a birth certificate to use a bathroom where the baby shot and killed a man. So he just keeps coming back to obviously the bathroom bans, he agrees they were dumb. I mean, it's pretty serious in the sense that I don't think cis women realize that cis women are getting assaulted in women's restrooms because other women thought you looked too masculine and that you were a trans woman, so they would assault you and call the police. So this is affecting everybody, just so you know. Nobody talks about that. I will say that I did appreciate about the bathroom stuff with Dave Chappelle is that he acknowledges at one point, he said if a man came next to him and squatted over the urinal, he just assumed it was a war vet that, you know, got his genitals blown off, which is an acknowledgement that genitals have nothing to do with gender. That this man who was a war vet, if his genitals got blown off, is no less a man because he doesn't have his genitals. So I thought, oh, progress. We're gonna have a break here. And then he tells a Juneteenth story about a slave that became a slave owner and a breeder. That the whole point of the story is that this slave followed the incentive of the time for success, and how fucked up that was. Again, I feel like Dave is talking about himself but doesn't see it. Like, he doesn't recognize that, yeah, Dave, you used to be someone who was marginalized, and now you're a superpower and a celebrity that people look to that has influence over how we think because you changed our view 20 years ago of so many things. And now someone who went to flee that hate and flee that life is now the perpetuator of it, that you are now literally spewing hate on all of us, that you are making money, the incentive of the time. You recognize that there is Asian hate out there to be money made out of, anti-Semitism where money can be made out of, LGBT hate which money can be made out of. You looked in the culture because you're smart, you're a genius. You saw, wow, look at all of this out there, and you knew there was money to be made, and you made it. And your David Letterman special, you talk about how you don't want to be MLK. You know, I don't want to be one of those people. There was no money to be made there. I guess that was really honest. I had hoped that was you being humble, but it was you being honest. You know what you're doing. You were incentivized by, you are working against your own community. You're damaging the black LGBT community. You're damaging every community, the black community, by not supporting the communities that support them. I don't see how people don't get this. Says the, oh yeah, he says a movie about that black slave owner's life. He says it's going to be called Space Jews. I mean, more anti-Semitism. He says just like the he says just like the slave owner was invested in a construct, so is he when it comes to gender and his wife's. Ugh. He talks about her vagina. It's just so annoying. He jokes about being accosted and trapped into to talking a woman. There's a woman at a restaurant or something. He invites her over. She starts talking, and she shows him pictures. He thinks she doesn't know who he is, and then she shows him pictures of her daughter, and he immediately says that he identified her as trans because of her masculine features, but didn't say this to the woman, and how mad he was that he couldn't. I'm so mad I couldn't just say, yeah, I know that's a trans woman by looking at her. And I just again think, like, if Ellen did a bit where she's like, oh, this white woman came over to me, and assuming Ellen lives in a reality where everybody, just like they think Dave Chappelle, they think transphobic. Let's assume in this reality they think Ellen, they think racist. So she feels safe. This white woman comes over and she's talking to her, and the woman shows her pictures of her daughter. And then Ellen, seeing that her daughter is black as part of her stand-up, starts to say racist things white racist people would say. We use the same way that Dave uses those physical monikers. She'd be like, oh, look at her hair. Oh, you could think I couldn't tell by that hair and that big nose and those big lips and, whatever racist, offensive nonsense people would say that equates to the same offensive bullshit that Dave said. If she said that, goes, you don't think I wanted to say this woman, she's an N-word. I'm annoyed that I can't just say, I can tell this to you, like that would be so wrong. But we don't see it when it's for trans. Why? Because people are prejudiced. I'm sorry. That's it. It's just built-in prejudice. Let's see. Oh, and then he talks about, so then that daughter that he saw in the picture, she shows up at a bar later that he says is like a very conservative Republican QAnon bar. And he makes a huge point of being like, I was really concerned about her safety. I felt like I needed to like immediately protect her because who knows? Which again is his acknowledgement that just being transgender somewhere could get you killed, and that everyone knows that she should know that. She should know it's unsafe for her to be here. So Dave has an awareness. He keeps acknowledging this awareness over and over throughout this. So it drives me nuts because he can't feign ignorance. He's well aware of how dangerous it is, and he doesn't give a flying fuck. Oh yeah, and then he says that he used to understand the rules, but white people keep changing them and making black people call them girls. It's so annoying, and I hate to. So Dave feels like he has permission to say, and I don't want to say this word too much, but just to make a point, say the word faggot. His analogy, I think, in one of his other specials is that he was told once, you can say the N-word, but you can't say faggot because you're not gay. And he goes, well, I'm not an N-word, so if I'm not an N-word and I can say that, then I should be able to say the other thing. Again, let's use that argument if Ellen said that. If Ellen said, I can say cracker, but I'm not a flaky, a flaky, crusty cookie or whatever the hell they call a cracker in the dictionary. That's not what I am. So if I can call myself a cracker, then I can use the N-word, because if I'm not a cracker and I can say it, then I'm not an N-word and I can say that too. People but Dave said that. People ate it up. People let him say it all the time. He uses it quite frequently. To this day, he's used it pretty recently. Okay, so next joke, he says he claims that gay people are misunderstanding him when they say they see him as homophobic. They aren't listening. He's trying to tell us. Oh yeah, so he's just trying that we're not listening. He's trying to tell us that we're racist, but we're not listening because we're too busy calling him homophobic. I don't know how. It's hard for us to hear you when all you're doing is degrading and insulting and pretty much pissing on us, and then asking the world to light us on fire. So let's see. Oh yeah, next he talks about TERFs hating trans women. He specifically says, what's a TERF? A TERF is a group of women that hate trans women. And then he goes, well, I don't want to say hate. Yeah, you were right the first time. And another thing, I cannot stand in all of his specials. I think in this one he doesn't, because I don't remember noting it, but he calls trans people things. If anybody, again, if Ellen said, if she called black people things or Asian people things or any other minority group a thing to describe them, that would be horrifying. He also, it wasn't in this special, but I do want to address it. He says that he thinks that it's funny because trans people think they are something different than they are, and he thinks that's hysterical. That's not. First off, I can't believe nobody said, again, he won an award. I think that was Sticks and Stones. I think he won. I was like, this is crazy. They're just giving out awards for anything nowadays. Trans people don't think they are something different from they are. The transgender problem is the world sees them differently than what they are. Something you'd think a black man would understand, in the same way that the world sees you and sees a criminal, but you're not a criminal because you're a whole universe inside of a human being that's lived a life. You have love and passion and desire and intelligence and wisdom and anger and sadness. So you're not a criminal because society. So do you think, ultimately a white person could say to Dave, isn't it so funny when they think there's something different than they are? Dave Chappelle thinks he's an equal. Dave Chappelle thinks he's a comedian. Dave Chappelle thinks he has power. That would be fucked up. That would be a horrible thing to say. So Dave Chappelle's saying that, and getting away with it and winning awards from it. Huge reflection on where we are as a society and how ignorant and stupid, and there's no feeling whatsoever from anyone. But I also, I think in that he talks about, oh yeah, transracialism. Oh, that's so annoying. He does the lazy transgender thing where he's like, oh, imagine if I was a black man who thought, himself obviously goes, who believed I was Asian. He's like, I walk around making an Asian face and talking like I was an Asian, and you'd have to treat me that way because that's how I feel on the inside. And just thought that was hysterical. And all I could think was, I mean, even if we follow that sort of absurd, taking a thought, like, I don't know, it's like reductio ad absurdum. There's a name for it where you just take a thought, you push it to its most absurd idea. And let's follow through with that. So let's say transracialism was a thing. Actually, there's a woman, she worked for all those, she pretended to be black for years or claimed to be black for years. How did that impact society? Well, it pissed a lot of people off, but if you look at all the work she did more for the black community than most white women ever would. And the only reason she did that is because she identified with the black community, because she worked to be part of the black community. So from my point of perspective, if there was an epidemic of transracialism, if all of us could wake up tomorrow feeling that we identified with a different marginalized or minority or just a different group in general, and we started to live our lives as if we cared about the things they cared about and acted in ways that would help those communities because we identified ourselves with them, I personally think that would be better for the world. I think that would be wonderful. I'm not afraid of that shit. I'm not afraid of people identifying and connecting to others in their and supporting them. I don't really know what harm it would cause it again in comparison to what Dave Chappelle is doing. If I had to choose between the two, his transphobic bullshit or just, loving and accepting people and seeing the powerful change that can occur in the world if we all start to make that decision, that's more the direction I wanted to head. But it seems society's got a different idea. I mean, it's like, honestly, it's like colorism. It's like certain black people say other black people don't get to say that they're black. You don't get to say you're black because you're not black enough. You don't get to say you're a woman because you're not woman enough. It's tired. It is white supremacy at work. We are all on the same damn team. Don't you get it? If one group is failing, then all of us are failing. We all need each other. We need each other. Oh God. Then he says that gender is a fact. Gender is not a fact. He can look, he has the time to Google feminism like a fucking bachelor that's giving a best man speech at a wedding, or Michael Scott from The Office. How bad are you doing as a comic when you're literally you're reading shit from the dictionary? That's a bad sign. That is not a good place to be as a comic, Dave. Oh my God. So sex and gender are different things. Gender is a social construct. So like what society thinks of as, what a man is and what a woman is. Different societies, different cultures, different times, that shit changes. So gender is not a fact. Gender is a construct. And sex, no, let's not even get into that, because I also have this whole thing where I'm like, but that has nothing to do with this. I'm like, okay, so if life begins at an inception, and genitals are everything, we all start out like, I think with gonads or whatever, like we are all technically female as we start in life. So anybody who's pro-life and think life begins at the conception, that thinks that the sex we are when we start life should be the sex we are recognized forever, I can't help but think of like this hysterical world where now men don't exist. They have to call everyone her. They're married to her. So now they're technically in a gay marriage. And then they can't get people to make them wedding cakes now because they're like, my wife, even though technically, oh my God, they've been married to a man for years. Now that they realize that if they're sticking with their pro-life and life begins at conception, and sex begins at conception, then everyone's a woman. I just love that. That's a real win for feminism. I mean, that might wipe out misogyny. Maybe that's the way to go. I'm just kidding. Oh, God. Oh, yeah. And then he also makes a joke that about Caitlyn Jenner being one of the year. Yeah, I agree. Caitlyn Jenner should have never been a woman of anything. We should have been woman of the day, woman of the month. I don't think she's done, honestly, she's probably done more harm to the transgender community than good. But As we know, fame and celebrity often allow the wrong people to be lifted up simply because they are the most visible and well known. I think you should know something about that, Dave. And then he makes a reference. He says, "How would you like to feel to Eminem to receive a award for being the best black person?" Like, yeah, the LGBT community knows a little bit about that. Do you know how many? Look at all the gay shows out there right now. Love Victor, Love Simon, Love anything. Think of a gay show. See how many gay actors there are. See how many gay writers, how many gay directors, how many gay anything. I mean, we literally couldn't get Milk, which is about one of our leaders that fought for rights for gay people to get jobs and gay people to get recognized everywhere. How many gay people are in that? Is Sean Penn gay? Is James Franco gay? I wasn't fucking aware. Do you realize that 18 out of the 19 people who have won Academy Awards for portraying LG, or nominated at least for Anne/1 for LGBT characters, are heterosexual? I mean, there's really no affirmative action for gay people, apparently. We can't even play ourselves in things because, I mean, can you imagine watching a movie where Eminem plays MLK Jr., and then they do an interview with him after, and he's like, well, I talked to my black friends about their experience, and that's how I connected. Because that's what it's like being a gay person. Every time we watch these straight actors do these, oh, it's so hard. I really had to tap in to what my cousin went through. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? That's why there's such a huge difference. I couldn't get through Love Victor Saved My Life, even though I wanted to, just so I could just be glad there was something out there. But there's just no nothing, no spark. Then you watch Heartstoppers, you're like, holy shit. It's like my skin's on fire because there's a difference. Because especially when it's young people portraying the coming out experience, those people haven't been alive and long enough to have the depth of understanding to connect to what it's like to develop in a world where you are hiding the moment you know who you are, the moment you have an inkling of who you are. And how that reframes every second of every day of your life and what that feels like and what it's like to hide your moments and to officially touch someone. I'm sorry, straight actors playing gay roles, aside from Cam in Modern Family, who is probably the most, I've never identified with a gay character as much as I did with him. So it's interesting that he happened to be a straight actor. You got to be that good. You got to be that good and that amazing. And he didn't do a lot of, he wasn't portraying the coming out experience. He did deal with a lot of stuff, but he did it gracefully, he did it lovingly, he did it compassionately, and he did have a gay counterpart in the role with him. So there was somebody else there who I think was probably holding him accountable, who he felt accountable to in a different way than if it was just two straight guys like Brokeback Mountain or however many gay movies where they'd love to put, call me by your name, da 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 da. Oh, so Dave Chappelle bitching about that shit when it's not even a real thing in his world and he doesn't even realize it. I mean, Trans America, was that a transgender woman in that role? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was Felicity Huffman. Oh, who was the transgender woman in that one series, Ugly Betty? Was it Rebecca Romaine Stamos? Last time I checked, she's cis. So shut up, Dave Chappelle. Oh, and then he does like a genitals joke about transgender people, like beyond pussy and things like that. Again, if Ellen was talking about black people's vagina, she was like talking about it as if beef. She's like, that's not, that's some ground chuck, brown on the outside, pink in the middle, blah, blah, blah. Pretty sure we'd all be just like, what the fuck, Ellen? Like, why are you talking about this? Why are you talking about black people's genitals all the time? And how different they are. That feels inappropriate. Okay, and then we start to get into the Daphne Dorman stuff. That's so Daphne Dorman is a transgender woman who so he talks about how he was performing in San Francisco and he noticed that she was laughing at all her jokes and how he thought that was odd because she was laughing at the transgender jokes, and he could tell she was transgender, so that made no sense. And how she came up to him after or she met him after a show or something, and said that she told him he was her hero, and she wanted to be a comedian, and he made a comment like, and how could you not like someone after they tell you they're your hero? So he knows he's planning for Sticks and Stones, this tons of transphobic shit, and he's got some more shows in San Francisco. So he thinks to himself, and he says this out loud to all of us. He confesses it. He says, "I'm going to call that trans woman." So he calls her. He jokes about her immediately offering her pussy to him. So great. And then that he just said, yeah, do you want to open for me? Without any awareness of her experience, which apparently he finds out later she's only gotten up in front of people 8 times prior to in his life. Again, if Ellen said, I had a performance coming up at the Apollo or in Detroit or somewhere where we think there's going to be a large black portion of the audience is going to be black. And she said, I was practicing a lot of these racist jokes. And what really baffled me is this black audience member kept laughing, even at my racist jokes. And that was interesting to me because I thought, what? I can tell they're black. They shouldn't be laughing at these. So then after the show, they told me that I was their hero. And I remembered I got a show coming up in the Apollo or in Detroit. And so I thought, I'm going to give that black person a call. And I called them, and the first thing they did was, of course, offer them sex. You know, those black people. I said, hey, do you want to open for me? Without any knowledge that they had any experience whatsoever. But let's be honest, I'm just using them as a shield. I mean, he didn't say the shield bit, but we all know what's going on there. So disturbing. So then he talks about how she bombs horribly for 45 minutes. And that he makes some reference. It's annoying. He's like, the crowd was so happy I got there. It was like, like water after being salt poured down your throat. It's like, why do you have to go there, man? Then he talked about how she sat down in the audience, how he couldn't believe it, that no other comedian he thought of after bombing that bad would have sit down and take a class and watch the next one. Which to me is like an indicator. Yeah, man, if you've never met any comedian in your life that's tough enough to deal with that, imagine what she's had to go through, that she is already tougher than all the comedians you've ever met. And this is her 9th performance, opening for her hero, a 45-minute set where she bombed. Come on. Put 2 and 2 together. And then he talks about how she was drunk in the audience and she started talking to him like, you talk to a TV. And that because the audience didn't like her because they found her, not funny at the beginning, that this guy started to shout at her, made a cruel public joke about her pubic hair, like, does a carpet match the drapes? And he talks about how he groaned, the whole audience groaned because it was so mean, how he was worried about how this guy felt wild, how he was worried it was an active shooter situation. So again, Dave is acknowledging that he was feared immediately. Somebody started talking to a trans woman. He was concerned. Is this an active shooter? This is mean. This is cruel to talk about somebody's pubic hair or their genitals in front of everyone. And that everyone groaned, including him. But he's still doing this stand-up. He just made fun of genitals. He just did all of this, even though... And then on top of that, he misses that. He's like so in shock. He's like, oh, she didn't even have to look back. She knew immediately what to say. That there's no carpet or drapes. It's all hardwood floors or something. And Dave was just like, wow, the audience lost it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, Dave, do you wonder why she didn't blink? Why she didn't have to think? Why she didn't have to look back? Because it's the first thing stupid fucks like that drunk, wild asshole do is comment on genitals and pubic hair, which is exactly what you're doing. The fact that you can't recognize that is the most basic, bland, lame hate joke in existence, the first thing transphobic assholes go to, and that you think that you're a genius for having you think you invented it? Come on. Okay. So then he talks about how they're having this powerful talk. Finally he starts asking all the questions, and they're having a real conversation about transgender rights, and they're digging all this stuff, and it felt pivotal. And then after they're done with that, he looks at Daphne and says, well, that was fun, but nothing you said made any fucking sense to me. And then he talks about how Daphne looks at him like he's not her friend anymore. And I get that. Like, I can't help but think, oh man, like that part, because everyone knows, not everyone, I think a lot of us know, we are so desperate for someone to understand and to be heard if you're in any minority community, in the gay community, because we're not built in. So, typically if you're black or you're Asian, you're born into families that understand and can help you navigate that experience. When you're gay or trans, you are not typically born into families or communities that help you navigate that experience. So finding somebody in your life that can will even start to try to understand your experience feels like everything to you. It means you start to open up something that you've shut down for a reason. You shut, and then when you start to open it up and start to open it up, and then somebody shuts you the fuck down like that, when you think you have just had a pivotal moment with your comic hero and an entire audience, and in your drunk state, you are not aware enough that Dave Chappelle is a ignorant, mean motherfucker who's never going to get it, and you think you are actually changing his mind, and you're going to walk out of this night where you bombed now as one of the most important pivotal experiences you've ever had, because you transformed the minds of an audience, and you transformed the mind of your hero, and your hero has the power to transform the minds of millions because he's done it before. You just changed the world. You just changed your life. Everything is going to be okay. And then at the end of that, he says to you, looks in your eyes and says, well, that was fun, but nothing you said made any fucking sense to me. And he had no idea what he did, how that hurt. I mean, he says he saw it. He says he saw it. But he has no clue. That pain. That is kill yourself pain. I know I hate saying that, but I know it because I know it. I have been there. I have been in that spot where you are taking such a big risk that if they don't get exactly what you're saying, you have no idea what you will do. Like, you don't know if you will, you're risking your life. You're like, I may kill myself. It's not a rational thought. It's not, but it's a pattern. It's a habit because my brain just can't live anymore with this suffering. and he talks about, that's when she says, I need you to understand, I'm having a human experience. I'm having a human experience. And Dave said, he looked at her and said, I hear you, bitch, or something. Takes one to know one. Fucking bullshit. Just exhausting. All right. So then he talks about how, so the good part after that is that she does get at the end of this set, he says, thank you to Daphne, and she gets a standing ovation. And she got to spend some time hanging out with some of these great comedians, which made me feel really good because I just thought how rough it would be. I don't know how I would respond if Dave said something like that to me after I thought we were having and that somehow she bounced back from that there was a standing ovation, and that, I mean, she probably sat with it a little bit later, but she had some magic moments, and I know what it's like to be with. I had this great honor once of being at this comedy club, The Fake, in LA, and all these comedians were there, and Robin Williams, who's like my hero, who I've been obsessed with my whole life. I got to like literally rub shoulders with him, but I never talked to him. But he told jokes, and sometimes he looked at me when he told them, and that's like one of the greatest moments of my entire life. So I can only imagine what it was like for Daphne to be in that moment. Okay, and then so then the next bit, he talks about how Daphne defended him, how she put up a post that says, punching down on someone requires you to think less of them, and I know him, and he doesn't. He doesn't punch up, he doesn't punch down, he punches lines, and he is a master of his craft. So that's great that she defended him. It was great. What she said was eloquent. She's obviously very intelligent. The thing is, and maybe she felt that wholeheartedly, it's no different than, I mean, how many black people have had, with white people tell them, I know my friend seemed racist, or I know my mom seems racist. They're really, really not. Or this person's not. Does it reassure you? Like, if that person continues to behave, act, and manage their lives in a racist manner because somebody else who's friends with them, who's the same in the same minority group as you, says, trust me, they don't mean it, is that a comfort to anybody? Not really. I don't think it's ever been a comfort to me, but maybe more people are more trusting than I definitely have some trust issues, I'll admit, too. I think the grossest part of this next bit is that he blames the trans community for drag. So Daphne defended Dave, And he makes it like the trans community dragged her, and he suggests that maybe that's why he killed herself. He's not sure, but it probably didn't help. That's beyond fucked up on so many levels. First off, there were, if you look at when she killed herself, there were 9 posts on her Twitter page, and most predominantly positive. There, so that it was just bullshit. It was just based in bullshit. That wasn't an actual thing. She wrote on some other people's walls, and there was some negative feedback. Nothing unusual, nothing. And again, she was seeking it out. People weren't dragging her. Nobody was going to her page and posting like it. That's just fucking patently false. And he even admits, he goes, it's my understanding, or apparently. So clearly he never even looked. So he's just saying all this stuff based on rumor to do with a real human being who was really alive, who he really knew. And then he then continues to say that he felt lied to because she always said she was a woman, but there is nothing more masculine or gangster than suicide by jumping off of a building, which is what she did. I think I forgot to go into the TERF stuff, but TERF is a hate group. TERF, saying I'm Team TERF is the same as saying I'm Team Proud Boys, I'm Team KKK. TERF, they try to get trans women fired from their jobs. They say that trans women that they should kill themselves. They literally, and they assault women. They assault both trans and non-trans women that they think are too masculine because they might assume they're trans women. They say horrible, they harass people, they follow people. They are a hate group. They are a hate group. So they say the most manly thing that a trans woman could do is to kill herself. And so for Dave to say something like that, to misgender her and sort of profess the darkest part of TERF ideology, maybe accidentally, I don't even have words. I don't even know what to say. I feel pukey. Anyway, so it's just it's upsetting because she is a. That's all right. I'm gonna have to keep going because I'm so you should probably see my face getting all red. So continuing, so he admits, he says that he's like, I read her obituary, and that's when he found out that she had a daughter. So he only found out that she had a daughter when he read the obituary. Talks about getting contact info from Anderson Cooper, because and then setting up a trust fund for Daphne's daughter, because he knew that was what was the most important thing to Daphne. So he went from just finding out Daphne had a daughter in her obituary to knowing the most important thing in Daphne's life was her daughter. It's a big leap. So we already kind of, what the fuck there? How is nobody catching this? Also, I don't know if anybody did the timeline, but Daphne killed herself, I think, in 2019, a couple years ago. Dave set up that trust fund for the daughter a couple months before his special, The Closer, my understanding. So that's a few years gap there. What took so long to set up that trust? I'm wondering. Is it that he still needed a shield? He still, even though Daphne 100% of his trans friends have committed suicide, he still feels he's right in what he's saying, and he still felt he could use her as a shield even dead. Maybe even she made a better shield even dead, because he can use her daughter. He can create a trust fund. This is so fucking disturbing. If Ellen had done that, if Ellen had gotten a black person who laughed at her racist jokes, and then they had a heart-to-heart about racism in America, and then at the end of that heart-to-heart looked at that black person and said, that was fun, I don't know what the fuck your crazy shit you're talking about, and then that black person went and killed themselves, and Ellen blamed the black community for that black person defending her racism, said that's probably why that black person killed themselves. I mean, and then
does a racist stand-up and uses that dead black comedian, that human being who killed themselves as a result of PTSD. This is what their family said. PTSD from trauma, from years and years of discrimination. And use that as justification. Do you think Ellen would have a lot of say if she was using a dead black person and giving that black person's daughter a trust 3 years after the fact and saying that this is why I get to say racist shit. This is why I am not racist. This is why, because I really care. Look at what I'm doing for black people. No, hell no. But Dave Chappelle, trans people, why not? Why not? It's a different situation. Fucking joke. Oh my God. Okay. Oh yeah, Dave said at one point he didn't know what the trans community did for Daphne, but it doesn't matter because she was part of his tribe and not theirs. He makes a joke where he talks about he can't wait to give Daphne's daughter her trust at 21, and he talks about misgendering her. He's like, I'm going to say he misgenders her just several different times. And he says, don't worry, Daphne would love that. That would have been Daphne's favorite joke. Yeah, Daphne loved transphobia so much, she exited the planet to get away from it. Dave, I don't think you know what Daphne wanted at all. As a matter of fact, Daphne told you what she wanted, and you said, that doesn't make any fucking sense to me. So clearly, you have no say in what Daphne wanted. And he goes on to say, empathy is not gay, empathy is not black, empathy is bisexual. It must go both ways. It must go both ways. And continues, he says, remember, taking a man's livelihood is akin to killing him. Remember earlier? All the suggestions how women should have got their rights? Apparently they should have committed mass fucking murder. Says, I'm begging you, please do not abort DaBaby. Imagine if Ellen was fighting for Roseanne. Imagine. And if she was saying all sorts of things like, well, if Roseanne can't call people apes, but DaBaby can, kill a man, say homophobic, transphobic things. He's punched out a tooth of a 64-year-old man. DaBaby right now, I don't know. Look him up. He's like 7 different things going on, and he's still going to be at the Rolling Rock Festival that he was last year in hot water for. So we could always anybody could play that game. They're going to be like, well, look, what's Roseanne doing and what's DaBaby doing? What's Roseanne doing and what's Dave Chappelle doing? You guys, why can you guys get away with it, but she can't? It must mean that black people have more rights. Which is bullshit. We know that's bullshit. It's just a fucking manipulation. It's what white supremacists have used for ages and ages. And now Dave Chappelle has adopted it as his own. He's just like pitting one community after another so that none of us can make any fucking progress and so that he can stay the fan of the white rich fucking conservatives. And they can just keep giving him tons of fucking money to do what he's doing, do their work for him in the guise of somebody who actually cares. Oh, God. And then he put, Kevin Hart dreamt his entire life of hosting the Oscars, and when he finally got the job, they just took it. It's not fair. First off, they didn't take the job. All they said is, you found some homophobic shit, we need you to apologize for it, and you can still host the Oscars. Kevin refused to apologize until months later, but he had already missed his window. They did not say, you can't do it. Nobody took it from him. He refused to apologize. That's a very different thing. So stop lying out of your ass. Oh my God. Let's see. He put, they didn't kill him. Kevin is a strong guy, but I'm sure it broke old Clifford's heart. It's over. LGBTQ, LMNOPQYZ, it's over. I'm not telling another joke about you until we are both sure that we are laughing together. I'm telling you this is done. I'm talking about it. I'm done talking about it. All I ask from your community, with all humility, will you please stop punching down on my people? Thank you very much and good night. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you shitting me? And he continued. So just, we all know he continued to be transphobic, homophobic. He refused to apologize. He put a target on Hannah Gadsby's back. Hannah Gadsby, who is a lesbian woman who does not present as traditionally female in the sense that all of that, extra accoutrement. She wears pants and shirts and what the rest of us freaking wear. And she has talked about growing up. She did a special Peabody Award-winning special where she is vulnerable and talks about what it's like growing up in a hateful country where she spent 10 years listening to them to debate debate over whether or not she is a criminal for being gay, where she talks about being violently assaulted and how unsafe she feels in the world. And Dave Chappelle thought, here's a good idea. In the most dangerous country in the world where it's to be American, and I know for a fact she came from a country where it's dangerous, it's almost criminal to be gay, and she's experienced assault and victimization. Let me put a target on her fucking back, because it's unfair that people put a target on mine. Disgusting. I don't even talk about his Duke Ellington visit. I'm going to do a whole separate thing on Duke Ellington and that visit. That school where they literally have kids, Dave Chappelle supporters, making death threats against other kids, where they had to up their security, shut down and lock their lunch department, and they defended cancel culture over the safety and their education of their students and their children. I have a lot to say about that school. I also have a lot to say about all of the people that didn't say anything about Dave Chappelle's special. All of those late night talk show hosts, all of those daytime talk show hosts, all of those comedians, especially the LGBT ones, that did not. I mean, and even not, and especially, I mean, the ones that supposedly support LGBT communities. Whoopi Goldberg had a show called Strut where she worked with trans women. What are these women saying to her? What are these women when she's staying silent? What is happening? Right? So it's an hour and 49 minutes. Nobody's ever going to watch this, but I've got a lot more to say. I mean, I probably have thousands of hours to say. I just needed to get something out there because it is just getting worse and worse by the minute, and I cannot stand Bill Maher with his shit. I got a whole thing on Bill Maher. I have so much to say about so many things. I told you I've already got 8 hours of stuff recorded that I don't even know. I'm just going to what to do with at this point. This was just a Cliff's Notes run through of what you've got to look forward to. So I hope that this clarifies why people are so upset at Chappelle, and why the comic community has proved they're capable of pulling punches, because none of them have said a goddamn thing about Dave Chappelle. So they can certainly hold their lips on marginalized communities. And please don't say things like freed the slaves. Matt Parker and Trey Stone talking about how cancel culture, think Hollywood, all of Hollywood is celebrating the end of cancel. You guys, South Park, Book of Mormon, you literally have a song where God, I think, you say God fucked us in the ass and gave us AIDS. I don't think cancel culture has been holding you back. Pretty sure you won like 11 Tonys for that and a bunch of other awards. So all of you need a fucking reality check. Wake up. There used to be 3 networks, and the comics that were saying the kind of stuff you were saying were going to jail every night and making no money, and most of society didn't want anything to do with them unless they were just watching them and getting drunk. So you're living in a spoiled ass comic world. You guys are the whiny snowflake bitches that are crying over people having criticism, when some of us work every day for minimum wage to have people criticize and cuss us out. We don't get a bitch about it. We don't get to ask for special rules. So you, with your millions and millions of fucking dollars, your power, your status, your celebrity, you do not get to be free of the things that we have to take except minimum wage for. That is bullshit. Anybody who's believed any of this nonsense about it being dangerous to be comics, about accepting cancel culture without even setting rules or standards for it, like, what are you doing? Start using your brain. Start using your heart. Start actually fucking listening to how stupid the things that people say. I mean, at one point in the special, Dave Chappelle says, why is it easier for Caitlyn Jenner to change her gender than Cassius Clay to change his name? That was 1960. That was March of 1964 when he changed his name. I don't think the Civil Rights Act happened until June of 64. Caitlyn Jenner was 7 years ago, and that's a white celebrity. In the 2015, you're comparing to something in 1964 before the Civil Rights Act happened. That is crazy. That's like, I mean, that's as dumb as saying, as planning a trip somewhere by the standards of 1890. I don't know. Of making a comparison between any gaps. I mean, I could say, that would be like me saying, oh, up until 2 years ago, why was it easier for black people couldn't get fired for being black, but I get fired for being gay? Why was it easier for black people to get married? I couldn't get married 7 years ago. Why is it easier for black people to get a wedding cake? And we have to sometimes go to the Supreme Court for it. Why is it easy? It doesn't mean that it's not hard for black people, because there's some things that they don't have to deal with that we do. It just means we have different fucking struggles. That is all. But they're all struggles, and they're all the same, and we need each other for all of them. I am so sick of people being lazy. I am so sick of people being discompassionate. I'm so sick of people being just dumb and not using their brains and listening to the words that are coming out of people's mouths and saying, that is fucked up and stupid. And all you have to do to really figure out if you're being prejudiced, is what I did for you to help people. If you're okay with a joke when it's a trans person, but you're not okay with a joke when it's a white person about a black person, if you're okay with a joke when it's about one minority but not another, that is telling you something about your inherent prejudice and belief system. And if you're okay with Dave Chappelle in The Closer, you have a lot of prejudice to work through and a lot of education to work through and a lot of compassion that you need to grow and develop. And I'm here to help. I'm just going to continue to make videos, and hopefully anybody that wants to absorb them will. All right. Thank you so much.